before you jump in, Jay, he did say in that video he's not retiring and he's not giving up this game for the vaccine. So, yes, again, even more unclear on his stance and if he will be playing with the Nets or not. Jay?
Well, everybody on this show has said that it's pretty unclear from Kyrie's IG Live. I felt like it was pretty clear. He stated that he was unvaccinated. He stated that he wasn't sure about how this would affect him in his career. He stated that at the beginning of the season, he was ready to play. And then due to municipalities, things had changed. And I think one of the things that kind of elevated the conversation yesterday, Stephen A., was that everybody wants Kyrie Irving to be on their timeline. They want him to be on their timetable. Well, he's not answering things fast enough. And as much as we're talking about the past history, and look, that's a completely different conversation, Stephen A., I am with you. There are a lot of questionable decisions. You know, I'm sitting up here with a Duke Brotherhood jacket on. I've been objective on your platform and others about some of the decisions Kyrie has made, right? But I think as it relates to this particularly, I think this is an unprecedented matter. And I'm okay with Kyrie taking his time to make this decision. He never said he was anti-vax. He never said he was pro-vax. He's saying he's trying to figure it out. Once again, I think there is something important about somebody trying to take their time to figure this out. You can go and talk to me about science and all the other things. I just think it's important for Kyrie to do what Kyrie needs to do for Kyrie to make the best decision. But it does feel like he has become the face of how people want to chastise those who are unvaccinated. And that's what happens when people who feel like they are being spoken to through the prism of Kyrie Irving, that creates this snowball effect. And I think that's what happens when there's venom that's being thrown. So for Kyrie in this particular situation, once again, I do think he made himself clear. He stated he was unvaxxed. And some things aren't unclear, right? Like he isn't clear about what his status is going to be with the Brooklyn Nets because you can't be clear because you don't know if the municipalities will change in time. You don't know how people's, what further evidence will come out about the vaccine in time. Maybe he will make his own decision and maybe he will be vaccinated.
Jay, when you refer to the timeline, we have a ticker on our screen earlier. The NBA season tips off in 5 days. We're not making up some timeline. The NBA season starts. They're the favorites to win the chip. And he's saying that, I'm not retiring and I'm not giving this game up for the vaccine. Okay, then what are you doing? Are you playing or not? That's what we want to know.
Okay,
so it's not that the media's creating a timeline. We're talking about him for no reason. We want to know, is he going to be out there on the court for Nets game 1?
Well, Molly, here's the thing. The thing is that the whole IG Live, from my point of view, was when he went from talking about he was doing research, right, before he did his IG Live. And then he went to talking about he's been the voice for the voiceless. And then he comes on the IG Live and says, he still loved the game of basketball. He's not retiring. You know what it's setting it up for? It's setting it up for when he does get vaccinated and he comes back to the Brooklyn Nets, he won't look hypocritical. That's what it's setting it up for. That's what that IG Live was for yesterday, to set it up so that when he does decide to return and get vaccinated, he won't look hypocritical.
Well, let me tell you where I think Kyrie was successful last night. And when he didn't say anything before last night, looked successful. He's painted himself as a victim because he is willing to stand up for his individual rights. Obviously, he didn't know. One thing he said that was very important that I actually side with him with. He came in, he worked out, he was ready to play, he was in shape, he was ready to go for the season, and then the mandate came down from New York City. I think right now it's in New York, L.A., San Francisco. I think there's another city. I think maybe New Orleans or somebody, but I'm not sure. But the point is that that's it. And there is a legitimate question as to why all these other cities haven't adopted the same mandate and stuff, but that's a subject for another day. When he said that the mandate came down, he didn't know that he wouldn't be able to play. They were initially told that they would be able to play even if they were not vaccinated. They would just have to go through extensive testing. He was fine with that. Here's where it ultimately becomes a problem. Number one, when you were talking to some kids in the off season, you weren't wearing a mask. When you were partying with your sister, during the NBA season when the NBA had strongly discouraged all of that excessive contact because we were still going through the pandemic and things were so, so up in the air and stuff like that. You didn't listen to that. And then we have to take into account, again, the history that I brought up. It's one thing after another after another. And the biggest thing for me is when you're gone for 10 months and 2 weeks in, you suddenly need a personal day after being off for 10 months. I don't know how much more glaring that can be. So listen, I've spoken to family members. I have spoken to, cats that are really, really close to him in the NBA, including coaches. I mean, Kyrie's got a lot of love, and it's well-deserved because he's actually not a bad guy at all. But here's the problem, Jay, and I'm coming directly to you with this. Mm-hmm. There is an air about Kyrie that intellectually, in his mind, he's here. And those who disagree with him are here. And when he talks, he sees himself as being totally right. And in the end, it comes down to being just about him. And my response to that is, nah, bro. Not when you've assembled what you assembled in Brooklyn. Forget the vaccine for a second. You assembled this. You and I both know, Jay, KP, myself, we know a bunch of brothers in the NBA, Molly, that wanted no parts of the vaccine. They did not want to take it.
I didn't want to take the vaccine,
exactly.
but I felt I had to.
I told you right. But what I'm saying is, there's a whole bunch of people that didn't want to take it. But they took it because they understood what the responsibility was, and they knew they weren't going to be able to play or it was going to be very inconvenient for them if they didn't play. And I'm saying, if you brought the team together, that's my issue. He brought them together, and he ain't there. That's it. Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming, sports, and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.